everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to have this second conversation with Kelvin Chen because, well, for the most part, we could talk to him about 10 times and still not get it all. I listened, I was lucky, I got to listen to a bunch of your YouTubes. Wow, 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 wow. So tonight we're talking about a subject for near death, but we could talk about past life. We could talk about so many cool things. And I think you all will be really excited to learn from this amazing man. Tonight we're talking about overcoming the fear of death through each of the four main belief systems. And I really think with COVID and this whole time period, this is really a valuable talk to have. To start out, I'm going to share this poem. I received this poem today from a friend of mine whose wife just passed. And he's struggling. He's conscious and he believes in a lot of metaphysics, but he's struggling. So I thought, how weird that it came through today. So I thought I'd share it. And it's called What If? And I'll read it off of this and I can share it on Facebook after we're done. So it is, what if? What if there is no death? What if we are eternal spirits born into our human bodies to live a joyful life of expansion? What if we are all connected by a greater consciousness, which is pure love at its very core? Everything in life is made up of energy which vibrates at different frequencies, even that of our bodies. No two atoms in our bodies ever touch. So what is the space between them, you ask? What if all space is just not an empty void? What if all space is a field of non-physical energy which flows to and through every cell of our bodies and connects us all? What if this energy was pure, loving, intelligent, non-judgmental, looking to express itself in the physical? Could our bodies be the medium through which we experience this consciousness? Could our bodies be both human and spirit, both the creator and the creation? What if we were all part of the same source energy? What if there was no separation and we are all each other's individualized expressions of this oneness? Could we then appreciate each other's differences and have fun knowing we are free to co-create with whomever we choose? Can we then live our lives without fear, focused upon all that we came to enjoy? What if our life does not begin or end here and there is no end in our journey? Can the past, present, and future come together in our now as we become aware of the blessings in front of us? What if this loving consciousness can help us experience our true potential within? Can we be okay with where we currently stand in life and can be eager to experience more? What if this is heaven on earth? What if we are eternal spirits born into our human bodies to live a joyful life of expansion? What if there is no death? And the signature is beacon of light. So what if? Right, Kelvin?
What if? Yeah.
Isn't that was fantastic, because that's really what we're talking about. Is we're talking about four different precepts of it, but you could start with your near death if you want to talk a little bit about it, and give us a little bit about your past life. That's the part I really want to know.
Okay, so we'll do this, as you are suggesting, in a non-linear fashion, because this group,
well, however you think is
well,
best.
no, I think that this group in particular, I think, can handle it, because they kind of have already dipped more than their toes into the waters of this whole area, Yeah. Some of them have jumped in fully, and some of them have their arms and legs in at least. So I had near-death experience, as Kathy mentioned, when I was 21 years old. So it was like 2 or 3 years ago, right, Kathy? So
yeah, in a blink of an eye.
blink of an eye. And so, no, seriously, I almost drowned off of San Diego. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. But before I tell you that, what's important and material to the near-death experience story is that I had already been meditating for 2 years before I almost drowned. So it goes to show you, accidents can happen, regardless of whether you're meditating or not, man, I'll tell you. And so I'd already been meditating. I learned to meditate when I was 19 years old. I was very, very stressed out. By the way, I did not, Kathy's alluded to some of my, we'll call them metaphysical or spiritual experiences and so forth. I did not learn meditation for that reason. I didn't know what spirituality was. I mean, I went to church, Sunday school when I was growing up, Protestant church in the suburb of Boston. I didn't really pay attention, to be honest. And I learned to meditate because I was very stressed out. So I learned when I was 19 years old, high anxiety. That's why I learned. It was later, you'll see, that when I started having spiritual experiences and stuff. But a couple of years in, I, been meditating, and then I was in college, obviously. At that time, I was at Dartmouth College, and they have a unique program with UCSD, University of California, San Diego, and La Jolla. That's obviously on the West Coast. I grew up in Boston. I'm going to school up in New Hampshire. I'd never physically even been to the West Coast before, never mind in the ocean. So those of you who know California, Sean and others who on here, I know, he's lived in LA before, that there are rip currents up and down the coast in a lot of parts of the world, not just on the West Coast, but you don't have them off of Cape Cod, where I would go. This is pretty much my isolated experience to swimming in the ocean. So I went to swim the first day of school registration. So school starts tomorrow. I meet this girl at registration. Let's go to the beach. She's also from the East Coast, unfortunately, in a sense, because neither of us knew anything about ocean currents in the Pacific Ocean. So we go into Torrey Pines. Those of you know the area, Torrey Pines State Park there, Black's Beach, and there's nobody there. It's just the two of us. And I walk into the water, and I'm about hip deep, maybe waist deep at the most. And I dunked underwater. It was a hot June day in San Diego. And I saw her getting smaller and smaller really fast. She was obviously she was about 15, 20 feet away from me, but she was not in the rip current. So let me step back. So those of you who don't know what a rip current is, there's all these currents in the oceans around the world. And rips are ones that they tend to come in, and they come into the coastline right along the coast, and then they whip out again. They're like rivers in the ocean, and you can see them if you're 200-300 feet or more above them, looking down. You can see these rivers, and some of them are moving very, very fast. They have them in the Caribbean and throughout the Pacific. And I got pulled out, and I talked to a friend of mine, recently, like 5 years ago, who is a merchant seaman. And I asked him, I said, those 300-foot high cliffs at Torrey Pines State Park were about 3 or 4 inches tall. How far out was I in the ocean? He said 1.7 miles. So within a matter of, I don't know how many seconds, maybe a minute, I was pulled really fast out in the middle of the ocean, like almost 2 miles out. And not the middle of the ocean, but a lot farther than I had swum all at once, in my life. And so I started swimming in. And so here's a little life-saving technique for all of you. If you ever happen to you or your grandchildren, your children, or anybody nieces, nephews, you tell them that you swim at an angle to the coastline, not straight in. I knew that from Boy Scouts, but I panicked. And so I was getting exhausted, and I started going down. So what happened down in the water. So now I'm seeing the water go like this, the surface of the water getting farther and farther away from me. And I left my body. For a split second, I left my body. This is not the usual, like in my book, I talk about, you know, some classic NDEs and so forth. I talk about here, and even classic NDEs. There's no, those of you who've ever had one, I know some of you have had more than one, you know, they're different. They can happen differently, even for the same person or from person to person. But mine was, I did not go to the other side like some people do in their NDEs. Mine was, I left my body, and the meditation saved my life. The fact that I've been meditating for 2 years. What do I mean by that? I was familiar with being out of my body. Many times, and you've probably heard, or if you've had an NDE yourself, most people are not familiar with being way outside their bodies. And when they have the NDE, it's a OMG experience, we'll call it, right? It's like, oh, what? You know, and all of a sudden they're completely out of their body, and they may be, you know, in another place. They may be in what we may call heaven in the Christian terminology, the afterlife, or they may just be out of their body observing themselves, looking down from the ceiling or whatever. In my experience, I was very familiar with that. That saved my life, because if I had paused and been in an oh wow kind of mindset, oh wow, you know, like look at my body going down, my body's still going down, gravity's still pulling me. By the time I come to 30 seconds later, and, you know, kind of come to into my, like, realizing it, that's my body, I probably would have been 20, 30 feet down. But because it was a split second moment thing, I went right back into my body. I knew how to do that. I knew that to do that. And that, and I was only about 3 or 4 feet below the surface at that point. And I struggled, because remember, I'm going down because I'm exhausted, swimming into the current. So I pulled myself up, and then I told myself to take my time, and I just took my time, and the girl I was with said it took about an hour to swim in. So that was my NDE, but it was an unusual, it was not your typical NDE, but there are many, many, many different types of, there's a huge range, you know, of near-death experiences that people can have. What else did you ask me? Oh, past life. So my past life memories started opening up about 7 years after I'd been meditating. So I'm meditating twice a day, you know, doing my thing, going to school. Then I went to graduate school. Then I was teaching meditation, started teaching meditation in 1973. And in 1977, that's when my past life memories opened up. And I didn't even believe in reincarnation, past lives. I'd hear people talking about it, you know, on these meditation courses that I'd go to. And I go, yeah, okay, all right. Their imagination's going wild. You know, I was very skeptical about it until I started having my own experiences. And then in the mid 1980s, I spontaneously opened up to the other side, and I started getting communications. And again, I was skeptical about that. Maybe I watched too many Star Trek movies. I don't know what's going on. Is this me? Is it not me? And then it became very clear to me what was me and what was not me. Just and similarly in the past life memories, they was spontaneous. I've never had a past life regression session. I just evidently don't need to. It just happens spontaneously. And so my memories go back about 6,000 years now, approximately 24 different lifetimes that I have memories of, various degrees and amounts of memories from them. So there you go, Kath.
Thank you. That was perfect. So you had said 25 lifetimes, right? Something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. So are all those lifetimes happening at this time?
No.
All at the same time?
No,
so time isn't linear.
My experience, time is linear. There's a past, present, and a future.
Okay.
And that when people talk about it seemingly at the same time, I think there's a couple of different, there could be many different reasons, but there's two that pop to mind for people thinking that. Because sometimes we can have memories, and I've probably had, I don't know, I haven't counted, but thousands of memories from those 25 different lifetimes over the last 6,000 years. And they can be so real. I mean, real, like all the senses, all the 5 senses going on. Wow. And everything all at the same, so real that it seems like it's going on right now. It's like, am I in battle right now? You know, I have rocks in my teeth. I can feel the rocks in my teeth, you know, that kind of thing, because the hooves of the, you know, dig it, the dust, the rocks, the sand blowing up, coming up in your face when you're in battle, so forth. You know, like 1,000 years ago, for example, or even like 200-300 years ago. So, you know, they're so real. That's one reason I think that idea can kind of, you know, germinate. Another reason is if you've ever had any experiences on the other side, people can think sometimes that time seems simultaneous or whatever, like stuff is going on at the same time, because my experience on the other side, because you and I've had lots of offline conversations, I've had lots of experiences on the other side, and separate from just communicating with people who are beings on the other side, is that my experience is that we can move really fast because we're energy, like you said kind of in your opening thing. If we're energy, then you know, energy can move really fast. You don't have any physical restraints. There's no physical biological body. You have an energy body. And a physicist might say, okay, that's a physical body because it's energy. Okay, fine, whatever. We don't want to nitpick that, but it's energy. It can move really fast. And light, what's the speed of light? It's like, I looked it up. What is it? Like 700 million miles per hour. It's just ridiculous. You know, so if you can travel at the speed of light, 700 million miles per hour, maybe I'm much slower than you are, Kathy, on the other side. Maybe I can only go half the speed of light. I can only travel about 350 million miles per hour to your 700 million miles per hour. I don't know what, but that's like stupid fast, right? So we can feel it. You can have experiences going that fast where it seems like you're in the, I don't know what galaxy, and then you're back in the Milky Way, and like you just went back and forth 6 times from the Andromeda galaxy to the Milky Way galaxy in that one sentence that I just said, you know?
Yeah. So the afterlife is right here, right? So what does that really mean to, well, we're talking about overcoming the fear of death. And we're talking about past lives, near-death experiences, and you've cataloged a lot of the different near-death experiences that in your book. Do you want to show your book again?
Oh yeah, my book
here.
Thank
you.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
so all I wanted to really get, so people aren't going to think, well, that's Kelvin, that's not me. Right. So I have to say, I mean, I've had a spiritually transformative experience. I haven't had a near-death experience, but it seems like it's almost identical. And the love place that you go to, the origin, the afterlife that's right here, it's available in that as well as a near-death, right?
Yeah. In fact, I jokingly, sort of jokingly, but seriously say to people sometimes, and I'll say to this group in my lectures, you know, you don't have to have a near-death. Don't go trying to recreate a near-death experience. Don't do that. You know, people go, oh, I've never had a near-death. I really want to have near-death. No, the near-death experience is a subset of a spiritually transformative experience. It's just one of the many kinds that you can have, and you can experience the other side without almost dying. So, you know, I mean that, you know, you don't have to, and you're absolutely right. Yeah. So it's right here. It's just, if you really want to distill near-death experiences and spiritually transformative experiences very simply down to one simple sentence, you could say that it's really our mind. First of all, there's 2 things going on. The first, it's our mind experiencing itself. Like that's what I experienced when I almost drowned, right? And it was a good thing I was familiar with my mind, the vastness of my mind. Otherwise I would have been in this, oh, wow experience, and my body's still going down, and I would have drowned. So first, it's the mind experiencing itself. That's the simple way of stating what we're talking about, but not just the little conscious waking state mind that was driving my car. I was driving my car with, an hour ago, but the vastness of our mind. That's also our mind, okay? Our individual mind. But that's one part of it, these NDEs or STEs. The other part is there is a reality that exists outside of me, you, my computer, whatever, and the afterlife. So me, us, all the stuff in here in our physical world, and all the stuff in our we call it non-physical. Again, the physicists would say, yeah, it's got energy, you know, okay, fine, whatever. The energy afterlife, that exists outside of me. And so how best and how most quickly to open oneself to experience that starts with us. And the more opened up we are to the vastness of who we are individually, the faster, the higher probability we can open up to the vastness of the universe and experience that.
Perfect. Perfect. And hallelujah. So what, as far as the topic of the 4 items that you wanted to talk to, do we want to go there? And then I do have more questions.
Yeah, we can go. Let's explain the 4 beliefs real quickly, and then you can go back to any of them, and
okay,
we can dive into any of them, and as your curiosity, you know, desires. But the 4 belief systems are not religious or cultural beliefs. So let me step back. The reason I got into helping people with death and dying is because my mom died when I was very young, and she was only around 50 years old. And I tell stories about my mom in that book. And to Kathy's last point about, oh, Kelvin had this experience, you know, I don't talk a lot about my experiences in this book. I'm going to talk all about my experiences in my 4th book, trying to finish the sequel to this book now, which is my 3rd book. But in this book, I only talk briefly a couple of my experiences. Mostly there's stories about other people's experiences. Most people I know. But my mom died very young, and she was the first person where I was literally emotionally blown away by her death, and it was very sudden. And I just started helping people by accident with death and dying issues, because probably, you know, now that I look back on it, hindsight 2020, this is 39 years ago now, I probably started helping people because I needed help. You know, we all say that, those of us who are self-aware, you know, we often do what we need. We do what we need the most help with, right? Helping other people. So I started to help other people because it helped me. And I started figuring out, I never studied this stuff. I was in law school at the time. I was in my third year of law school, and I just stumbled into it. And I figured out trial and error, what worked, what helped somebody when I said it this way, or I told a story this way, or talked about my mom this way, and it helped them with their death and dying loved ones and their own fears about death and dying. One thing that I noticed was that people would tend to get hung up in those 2 areas, religion and cultural beliefs about death and dying. And sometimes if there was more than 2 of us, more than me and another person, if there were 3 or 4 of us talking, people would start to nitpick with each other and get into mini arguments, a little conflict, you know. And I thought, this is not good. We should be able to talk more openly about death and dying in our culture, and we don't. Everybody stuffs it and doesn't talk about it unless they talk about it within the confines of their church or their religious group or whatever. And it's all the same people talking about the same stuff in the same way. And I thought, how can we talk about this more openly? And so that's when I came up with the 4 belief systems. I was talking to my buddy George, and we came up with these 4 belief systems. And so the 4 belief systems really underlie and support all the religious and cultural beliefs out there. So I'll lay them out to you, and you'll see what I mean. The first belief system is the science belief about death. What happens when you die? Nothing. That's what their belief is nothing happens other than your body rots, you know, and your mind shuts off. That your mind and your brain are one, they're connected, and when the physical body shuts off, the mind shuts off. That's it. That's the first belief system, the science belief, right? That was my dad's belief system. Second belief system, I call the fear of continued existence, fear of continued existence. So whether you believe in an afterlife or not, there's some fear for whatever reasons. And I'm going to talk about how to deal with those different fears and so forth. I'm talking about it in my 3rd book, but I stay focused in this book on giving tips on how to overcome the fear about death itself. 3rd belief system that exists out there is I don't have any fear. I'm good with it. I don't have any fear at all. That's the 3rd belief system. They believe in an afterlife, but there's no fear, and maybe even looking forward to it. The 4th belief system is reincarnation, past lives, believe in an afterlife, but the mind's going to continue, and it can hang out on the other side in the afterlife, or what, Christian, terminology we call heaven, for as long as you want. But you can come back if you want, and you can take another, have another lifetime in another physical body, if you want to. Reincarnation. Those are the 4 beliefs. Some people are hybrids. They sit on the fence between some of them. That's okay. So I take people wherever they're at in my work. This is one of the arms of my nonprofit work. And I help people overcome their fear of death. They do not have to believe what I believe. I don't even tell them what I believe unless they obviously ask me. I'll tell them. But so I help a lot of people who have no belief in an afterlife, and they're freaked out about death and dying. So they don't have to change their beliefs. That's my teaching in all of my teaching. And I think you guys, those of you who were with us in CCC, the last time I spoke, I'm sure I said that to you. You don't have to change your beliefs. I'm here to give people ideas. You run with what works, and you shelve the stuff that doesn't resonate.
So Kelvin, you do volunteer, nonprofit work and volunteer work with people. What are your most favorite things that you've done with that work? Because you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, wow. Well,
excuse me.
Favorite is an interesting word. So but the one word that was most moving for me, well, it's hard to say most. I'll give you a couple of different examples, okay? So I'll give you one quick one and then a little bit longer one. So the quick one, I do this for free, what I'm going to describe to you now. I help people who are at end of life or in a coma. They can't speak, or they're just nearing end of life. Maybe they can speak. This woman, so either way, communicate or not communicate, doesn't matter to me. But I do this for free. And then when they're at the end of life, because what do you get a charge? I mean, I'm not here to take advantage of people, right? So they need help, and they're usually desperate, right? So I help them. And so this woman contacted me. This is the daughter I'm telling you about now. I'm guessing she's probably 45, 50 years old, something like that. She contacted me from England, from London, England. She found me online, Overcoming the Fear of Death. She Googles it. People find me online. And she said, I don't know if you can help, but the doctors cannot figure out why my mom is still alive, because she has so much painkillers in her. I don't know, morphine and whatever else they had in her. And they were managing her pain responsibly. And they were not going to give her any more because they're being responsible about it. But the doctors told the daughter that she already has so much in her that for this long, they can't figure out that she's hanging on. And so the daughter had already talked to the mom when she could communicate, before she became unable to, that she had no fears about death and dying. She was looking forward to seeing Jesus, and she was very Irish Catholic, devout, 3 to 4 times a week going to church. So as I asked the daughter, tell me about your mom's belief system, so I said, when are you going to see your mom next? She says, I'm going tomorrow to the hospital. I said, great. So we set up an appointment. You hold up the phone next to her. You can be there, put me on speaker, and I'll talk to her. And that's what she did. And her mom hadn't talked for a couple of weeks. She was conscious, but those of you who've had any experiences with people who are dying, sometimes they'll open their eyes up and they may be blinking, but you can't tell if anybody's home. Like, are they there or are they already on the other side? But their physical body is waking up, and she can't move. She couldn't move. Okay. So she was in that state. So she knew her mom was awake. She's blinking. And so she held the phone up, and I talked to her through her belief system, about her Irish Catholic belief system. I talked to her through that lens about what would happen, and that Jesus would meet her and all this stuff. And I gave her a picture of what would happen, a description, and I probably talked to her for about 5-10 minutes at the most. And then we hung up, and the daughter texted me a little while afterwards, and she said, my mom talked to me for the first time in 2 weeks. She beckoned me with her eyes. She blinked and beckoned me with her eyes. So I went over and I put my ear down to her lips, and she just said one word, beautiful. And it was the last word she ever spoke, because she went into a coma that night and she died the next day. And so I have this, I have the emails, and I copied and pasted. I asked her, the daughter, if I could put that on my website, and she said, yeah. So I do that with people. So I've done that a number of times. Here's another one. This was local in Los Angeles. A woman contacted me again, found me on the internet. She was lucid enough to Google, work her laptop and so forth, at least at this point in her dying process. And her best friend was already there in the house staying with her. And so she had her best friend call me up, and she vetted me, and she said, okay, I'm going to tell Lark about you and so forth. And the woman's name was Lark, who was dying. And she had a lung transplant that was being rejected by her body. So I met her on April, and the rejection started in February. And so they knew that it was days or weeks, not months, for her to live. And so by the time I got there, her husband's there, her 96-year-old mother, who's strong as a horse, is there, her sister or brother, and nieces, etc. The house is full of people by the time I got there. So I taught her to meditate immediately, because her desire was not to be afraid of death. So I said, well, let me teach you something that you will never forget. And Lark, at some point, you might not be able to, incommunicado, not be able to communicate with people. You will never, ever forget this, what I'm teaching you. And I'm getting a little emotional now. And she was conscious, and we talked about death and dying. We talked about her belief system, and we talked through she was Jewish, and we talked about, but she was like not a Jew, but grew up Jewish. She was not into it anymore, but, so he had a hybrid kind of belief system. We talked about that and what would happen and so forth. She couldn't communicate for about the last 10 days. She died 3 weeks to the day I met her. 3 weeks. And I sat with her the day she died. Well, she died that night, and I went every day. She was here in Los Angeles, and I went every day to sit with her for a couple hours and meditate with her and just sit with her, even when she couldn't communicate anymore. And after she died, I sat with her in her room, and they had her dressed very nicely, lying in state in her bedroom with lots of flowers around and stuff. And she came and talked to me. And then another guy who I became actually good friends with died recently of, was it glioblastoma, brain tumor, huge brain tumor, younger than I am. And he's a very close friend of mine, very close friend of a friend of mine. And I meditated with him almost every day for a year. And then he just recently died a couple months ago. So those are like the most moving things for me. Obviously, I help people who are not dying and who just have fears about death and dying. And then for them, and they start as young as 16, my youngest is 16 years old in that category. And she's in New York, and she's good. Now she can live the rest of her 80 years or whatever she's got, 70 years free from the fear. So that's very rewarding in obviously to help anybody, doesn't matter what age, but especially 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds,
So last year's IONS online conference was you don't die alone.
Right.
And do you want to speak to that too? Because
Sure.
the fear is that you'll lose everything you built. You think this is so real. And
Right.
that, oh no, it's not, turning a page in a book. Oh no, no more book.
Right.
So could you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. So first, there's a bunch of degrees to that question and answer. So as Kathy alluded to, I spoke with several other very experienced people on that panel at the IONS conference last year, that we don't die alone, whatever the actual name of the panel was, something like that. And because in COVID situation, the IONS folks, the organizers, thought that would be a very timely topic, because people were physically in hospitals holding up their, or the nurse or whoever would hold up their smartphone or tablet so that they could say goodbye to or the family, because the families couldn't be in the room with them because they had COVID and they were dying of COVID. So we spoke about this idea that nobody really dies alone. You may die physically alone, but the room is full. And I've had this experience myself with people who I've been with. Like I tell a story in here about Jimmy, and I was with Jimmy for probably 2 months, living in his house. You know, I was dating his daughter. And so we lived in the house with Jimmy and took care of him every day for the last 2 or 3 weeks before he died. And we were with him at the moment, in the room with him at around 10 in the morning when he died. And so you can feel the presence of, you know, sometimes those of you who have had any experience volunteering, or some of you may be hospice doctors or nurses yourself, and you know, you've had this experience, and you or just been in a hospital, never mind hospice, but been in that environment. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you can feel the presence, but they're there all the time. Sometimes we can feel it more strongly than other times. But they're there, and it's friends and loved ones to greet. And there's a whole greeting party, really, and it helps the dying person acclimate. And there are what I call counselors. I just call them counselors. There's nobody, people don't have titles. This is Kelvin Chin informal linguistics. Okay. So it's like there are counselors who you may not know. They may not be family or friends or whatever, but they're there to help you acclimate. And especially for anybody who's listening here now, who's live, or maybe listening to the recording later, who's had a loved one who's died by suicide, which is horrific and tragic. And I get emotional thinking about it because I help so many parents. I've never experienced this, knock on wood, anybody who's, you know, in my family, but I've helped so many families with this. It's so tragic, you know, that somebody would be so distraught to take their own life. And they often are a little bit confused because, first of all, if they have my dad's belief system, they're confused because, like, well, wait a minute, I thought I wasn't going to not exist anymore for the science belief, right? And all of a sudden they're still there. Then their body's not there, but their mind is still working and their personality is still continuing and they still remember. And so there's counselors for everybody, but especially for people like that who may be confused for various reasons. Not suicide's not just the only reason somebody might be confused. So there's a lot of help is the point. And I say that to people so that they feel they can take a deep breath and they're okay. You know, that there's lots of, it's not just friends and loved ones, but there are others to help acclimate people. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that takes a lot of the pressure off of being afraid of dying, is that it's a continuation.
Yeah.
And that you'll see others you recognize and they'll help you. So it's not like you're abandoned.
Yeah. The other thing, Kathy, think about this. A lot of people are just, understandably, they think about this lifetime, which I'm all in on this lifetime, by the way. Even though I have memories of these other lifetimes, this is the Kelvin Chin one. I'm all in on this lifetime. I don't like, pine away for this. No, I use those memories to help teach me about my personality, that what can I adjust to help me more today, right? But think about it in terms of this greeting party, Kathy. It's not just from this life. I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of lifetimes each of us may have had, you know, at least dozens, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands, I don't know. And then how many friends have you had? 5, 10, 20, 100?
Yeah.
Times, how many lifetimes? There's a lot of friends who can greet us, right?
My friend Peter calls it the after party. And when somebody does something, goes, well, I'll find out what that really was at the after party, because I can't figure it out now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And all those friends will fill you in and say, remember you did this or whatever, you know, whatever. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, so there's some wonderful comments here. It's they're saying it's wonderful what you do, grateful that you you and your foundation serve folks as they face an inevitable, beautiful heart. We have, okay, so isn't using the terms heaven and hell referring to religion?
Yeah, so that's why I tend to stay away from it. I just call it afterlife.
Okay.
So, because in my experience, there is no hell. And if somebody really wants to believe that there is, that's, you know, I don't try to change people's belief, but structurally, there is no place of punishment. There's no punishment on the other side.
Right.
You could punish yourself. Nobody's preventing you from doing that, you know, just like on this side, but no. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Then another question was, does Kel have any experience with death cafes where
Yes.
healthy folks talk about death issues?
Yeah, I used to go to a death cafe once every, I can't remember, it was once a week or once a month, probably once a month. Can't remember, when I lived in Austin, Texas. Yeah, so I have lots of experience having gone, and it's useful and so forth, and people may find it helpful, etc. So.
Okay. And this is for Sean. Sean and I have had giggles before about people that have multiple NDEs, why they need to have 4 or 5 or 6.
You're gonna ask yourself that, Sean. Sean, that's between you and you.
So no, we'll be talking and he'll say, well, that person had 5, and it was like 5.
You know,
Oh my gosh, their poor body.
Those people who don't know, I'm joking with Sean because he and I have a pre-existing relationship with this, and we're kind of friends. And those of you who don't know, Sean has had a number, I can't remember, is it 4 or something like NDEs? So that's why I'm teasing him about it.
Yes.
But you know, yeah.
Yes. Well, so is it because each time you get more of the lesson, or what is it? Is that,
who knows? Who knows? I mean, it's individual. It's like, you know, because your NDEs different from mine, different from Sean's, different from, you know, name a person. And so, and everybody's, whatever lesson somebody wants to draw from an experience is unique to that person too. And some people don't draw lessons, you know, they don't draw the same lessons, and some people don't learn from skinning their knees either, not just at NDEs, with anything in life, right? So right. Yeah, it's impossible to say. There's no.
Well, that was one of the things I really found remarkable about going to the IONS group meetings when they were in person, and hopefully this year they'll be in person again in Salt Lake City in September, first part of September. But there were so many people that had experiences, and so many people didn't tell anyone for like 30 years that they had an experience, and they may not have been able to categorize it. They probably were afraid someone would think they were crazy.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Some people are afraid of that. And I have clients who have contacted me, and they've had NDEs, and they've been directly, not even direct, they've been directly told that if they share that with somebody, you know, their minister, their priest, or whatever, then they're going to be sent to a psychiatrist.
Institutionalized.
Yeah, medicated. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. So Sean put it's going in for tune-ups.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that can happen too. But like I said, you don't have to have an NDE to go in for a tune-up. You can close your eyes and you can connect and have an you know, you can spiritually connect with yourself, is the point, without having to go into Sean's extreme. So, you know, yeah, that's why I said, Sean, you got to figure that out.
So, but I mean, there are a bunch of people that it's like a badge of courage. Well, I've had 6, well, I've had 7.
Yeah, that's kind of silliness in my mind, because that goes to one of the essays that I have in the other book, that, you know, the book we talked about, the other book. Yeah.
Yeah. Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah. This idea of the importance of being important becomes the important thing for some people, just showing how important they are. And so whether it's a spiritual experience, or whether it's money, or whether it's where their kid goes to school, or what grades they got, or it can be anything. So it can be spiritual people are just as susceptible as to that foible, who call it that, the frailty of falling down that rabbit hole as anybody else. So we need to, where's that come from? That comes from insecurity, inner insecurity, right? And so what we need to do is strengthen ourselves, and then we don't fall into that rabbit hole of trying to make ourselves seem more important than other people. Because the reality is, in terms of if you really understand spiritual concepts, and especially the one fundamental one of free will, nobody's really better than anybody else. Everybody's figuring it out. Now, somebody may have had an experience where you go, wow, you had an NDE, that's an amazing, or you've had that amazing SDE, or wow, you can remember your past lives, I can't remember them. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean the person who can remember their past lives is more evolved than you. It does not mean that. And so we are all figuring things out, in my opinion, my logic tells me, for eternity. And as Woody Allen said, eternity is a really long time, especially near the end. He said, but no, there is no end to eternity. That's so plenty of time, right?
So Noel wrote, so what is the best way to reduce my fear of death?
I think it's twofold. I think there's two prongs to the approach that I talk about in my book. And one is clearing up misunderstandings that people may have. And again, you don't have to believe in an afterlife. Like I said, it doesn't matter which of the four beliefs. So my dad never had any fears about his death or dying, because he really firmly believed the science belief that the brain was going to shut off. That's it. So he had no fear. He said, this is it. This is my life. I'm all in. I'm living my life fully, and trying to do it in a way that I'm not hurting people, but all in, doing whatever I want to do. And so within the framework of social mores and laws and all that stuff. Okay. But most people who say that their first beliefs, they have fear because they're not sure. And so the fear of uncertainty, how do you deal with that? So as I said, two-pronged. One is clearing up misunderstandings about the afterlife. Oh, am I going to be punished and all that? And so we can talk about that. That's content-oriented. Getting rid of the fear of uncertainty is more experiential. It's not so, because you can't just say content to the person. Change your thinking. You think positive thoughts and you'll feel great. I'll feel great for about 5 minutes or 5 hours or maybe 5 days. And then I'm back in the tank again, feeling freaked out, because changing my thoughts is not going to do it long term. So changing the underlying fear of uncertainty, which is really what fear of death distills down to, if you really look at it, because we don't know. We're all going to know when we know. So how do you get rid of the fear? I tell people I cannot get rid of uncertainty. That's part of the universe we live in. There's free will, different choices, and so forth. Stuff happens, but I can help you get rid of the fear. So how do we do that? We balance the brain chemistry, and then we expand our conscious capacity of the mind, the vastness of the mind that we talked about earlier in our talk this evening together. How do we expand outside what the psychology professor at the University of Houston told one of my students, he called it the 8-inch plastic bucket part of our mind, our waking state part of our mind, that has like 10 ping pong balls bouncing in and out, 10, 15, whatever, the exact number doesn't matter. You think those are your thoughts and your emotions, and you think that's your mind, 8 inches. No, it's huge. It's this big, huge Houston Astrodome football stadium. It's huge. But you don't know that because it's dark and there's no lights on, and you're the only one in there, and there's this little desk lamp over the 8-inch bucket, and you think that's it. So that was the end of his analogy. So I've taken his analogy, I've expanded on it, and I said, that's what I teach people to do. How to expand their conscious capacity and turn the light switches on in the rest of this 90,000 seat empty stadium, which is our mind, analogously. And then our fears dissipate. The anxiety reduces. Why? Because you feel more powerful. You feel more foundationally grounded and centered and balanced and just self-confident, because it's like, okay, that's how powerful and how big my mind is. Bring it on. I don't care. Uncertainty, I can handle it.
Right. Well, all of a sudden you're fascinated with all of it rather than fearful of it anyway,
Yes, exactly.
because it's a new adventure.
Yes, exactly right.
Right. Okay. Well, so we've got a couple more great questions here. Dr. Pamela Durales asked, have you had encounters with your dad after he died? I know that answer. Any any change of his scientific belief after he died?
Well, the short answer to all those questions are yes, yes, and yes, and yes. Or if there were 3 or 4, I can't remember how many questions. The short answer is yes. So I'll tell you a couple of funny stories. So I'm going to tell you one that's not in my book. I'm just going to briefly allude to the one that's in my book, because you know about that one, Kathy. That's the he visited us 3 times before he died, when I took his ashes. Well, not just me, but my brothers and my sister, our families, we took his ashes to Hawaii to be interred at the military cemetery. Those of you, Sean knows, in the Punch Bowl at the U.S. It's like the military, cemetery of the Pacific, something like that is the name. But the locals call it the Punch Bowl because it's in an extinct volcano that looks like a punch bowl. It's this gorgeous view of Waikiki and so forth, and it's a beautiful cemetery. That's where my dad's ashes are. And so he visited us 3 times. That's all I'm going to say about that. This is a more recent one. The one that's not in my book happened obviously since I wrote the book. And more recently, just a year or 2 ago, this happened. And one of my students, my fear of death students, contacted me, and to this day I've never met this guy Joseph, and he lives in Ohio or Indiana, someplace there in the Midwest. And I taught him to meditate. I talked to him. I took the 2-prong approach, right? I talked to him about his death and dying, content-wise, through his belief system. He's very religious and so forth. And so I talked through that lens, and I taught him to meditate to help change his brain chemistry and balance that and expand his conscious capacity. And those of you who don't know, I was a test subject in the first medical studies ever done on any kind of meditation in 1970 and 71 in the US. It was published in all the medical journals and everything. They took blood samples. So that's how I know about the brain chemistry and all this stuff. Well, Joseph sends me a text. And the text says, Kelvin, I think your dad visited me last night. And I'm like, whoa, what? So I'm reading this. Okay, I got the text from the guy, right? That's all he says. So that's like a text, Kathy. You get a text like that, you don't text the person back. You pick the phone up, right? And you go, short of hopping on an airplane and flying to Indiana or wherever he is, I called him up, and he tells me, it's like, Joseph, what are you talking about? He said, I had this dream, and he's been having lucid dreams he thinks his whole life. I think Joseph was in his late 40s, early 50s, something like that now. And so this was just a year or 2 ago, right? And so he says, yeah, in my dream, Joseph is flying a World War II bomber over the ocean. I later sent him a picture of what the bombers look like that my dad worked on in the Second World War. And so he knew a little bit about this because he had just started reading my book. So he knew my dad was in the Second World War, but he didn't know all the details that I'm going to tell you. And my dad was a mechanical engineer, graduated Northeastern, and then immediately went and enlisted, 1942. And he was a mechanical hydraulics engineer. So Joseph didn't know that level of detail. And so he says, yeah, in this dream, this young Asian officer comes up from the rear of the plane, the bomber, and we're flying over the ocean. And he comes up and we're talking about the hydraulics in the engines of the bomber. And if the hydraulic fluids are proper and, the levels and all this stuff in there. And he said, yep, everything's good. I checked everything. Everything's good. And so, and then this young Asian officer looks at me, Joseph, telling me this. He looks up at me and he smiles and he goes, you're afraid of death, aren't you? And Joseph says to him, how do you know that? There's only 6 people in the world I've ever told this to. And the sixth person I just told 3 weeks ago. And the young Asian officer goes, I'm getting a little emotional right now. He goes, the young Asian officer says to Joseph, oh, you mean Kelvin? That's my son. And you know, right? And then, see if I can find it quickly. And then I sent, so he tells me this, and then they sat and they talked, and evidently they talked for a while and in the cockpit, and like they were old friends for the rest of the flight together. Okay. And then right after I hung up, I texted Joseph this picture of my dad. All right. Where is it? Hold on a sec. I texted this picture of my dad to Joseph. And this is a picture of my dad. Here it is. Here you go. That's a picture of my dad. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Picture of my dad in the Second World War in his uniform. And Joseph sent me a text back and he said, I'm not kidding you. That's exactly what the guy looked like in my dream. And that's what he was wearing in my dream. And then I sent him a picture of a B-29 and he said, that's what I was flying. And those are the bombers that what my dad worked on when my dad was in India and in China when they were bombing Japan.
Wow. So he made sure that it got back to you. That was
yeah, exactly.
So he's watching what you're doing from the other side.
Yeah, and he visited my daughter another time about 2 or 3 months after my dad died in 1999. He came and visited my daughter, and my kids have been steeped in this stuff. My daughter's 27 now. My son is 33 years old. My kids have been steeped in this stuff since birth, because I've been having these experiences since long before they were born. It's no big deal. My daughter just told us this like 5-6 years ago. She told her mom and me that my dad and mom visited her. She didn't even, like, hey, what do I got to tell you? It's like a big deal.
Wow. Okay, so here's another one Noelle and Bob put in.
Yeah.
I have a friend dying. What do I say to her, and what do I say to those that have just lost a partner, even though I don't believe that we lose anyone?
Right.
How to comfort ?
Yeah. So those are two different groups of people. You have the person, what I heard was this person dying, and
Right.
then the other people, right? Who have loved ones who are dying, right?
Right.
So the dying person, I would just go through what I did do something similar to what I did on page 56. If you have this book, you can just write this down if you're going to get it later, but page 56, 57, 58, 59. So those 4 pages is a good example of what to do. Because I took my friend Jimmy, who I told you about, who was dating his daughter at the time, who was dying, and we moved in with him. And so it kind of goes through it literally goes through step by step. I tell him this story, what I did with him. And so, but without going all the details, I'll just tell you, the first thing you do is you talk about, you want to find out what their belief system is, because you don't want to step on people's toes. And their belief system may be similar to yours, or maybe somewhat similar, maybe very different. So depending on where they are, that's the lens you want to look through, because God forbid, we're not there to stress them out more. It's like, well, you got to change your belief system. No, that's like the worst thing to do, in my opinion. Okay, I get it, why people do it. They're well-intentioned and all that, but that's not, the person is not in a malleable state typically. Then they're freaking out. Okay, if you're having that kind of conversation with them. If they're all open and they're like totally cool, then you're having a different conversation. It's not a fear-based one, but that's not the question here. So so that's what first thing. And then I would look through their lens, which is what I do. I lay that out in the book, as you know, Kathy. So how to look through that lens of that person, and you tell some stories, and you see if there's any doubts in their belief system, because very often there will be some doubts. And those doubts, like Jimmy and the Jimmy story here on page 56, I think I said, whatever it is, he said, well, I'm not sure. He said this. So I said, what's your belief system? Well, I think that's it. So I said, oh, that's my dad's belief system. And he goes, but I'm not, but I think that's what happens. I said, what do you mean you think that's what happens? Well, I'm not sure. So I did not lead the witness. Those of you who are lawyers out there, you know what I mean. You don't want to lead the person and say, well, what do you mean by that? You mean by this, that, this? No, don't do that. But I asked open-ended questions and to kind of find out more of what he meant, in this case, Jimmy. So that's what I would suggest you do. And then once you figured out what their belief system is, then you can talk to them more clearly about their fears. You ask them what their fears are, and you see if their fears match up with their belief system, because sometimes they don't. Sometimes they make no sense. And sometimes I point that out to people, and I'll connect with them. Like, I'm working with people in 55 countries now. So like, I'll connect with them 2 months later on WhatsApp. I'll send them a message around the world, whatever, and say, yeah, how you doing? Say, oh, the conversation I had with you, great, I'm good. They don't even need another conversation. Right? They're good. Okay, fine. And I do that for free, by the way. I do a free first phone call on my nonprofit. I do free first phone call about anything I do with people. So, so that's what I would do with those people. Now, the other group of people who have the dying loved one, that, again, I would do a variation of that same thing, is to find out what their belief systems are. And if you have a group of them, they may have different belief systems.
Right.
So depending on how well they're getting along, because just to be candid, I've worked with a lot of families, and not all of them, sometimes there's stuff just hits the fan, when their loved one is dying, especially if there's property involved, forget about it, but even if there's not property involved, emotionally, it stirs the dust up. And so if it's that kind of situation, I would talk to them privately. I would talk to individually and privately, people in that group. I would not talk to them in a group, because then you're going to end up doing a group mediation, which I've done that in the legal world. And that's like,
yeah,
it's not easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I know when my mother died, it was just all that unprocessed stuff with my mother showed up everywhere with my siblings.
Exactly.
And it was like, not now.
No.
Anyway, okay, so Tax asked, Kelvin, in the context of you saying one does not have to have an NDE to have a tune-up, can you talk about breathing exercises?
I don't teach breathing exercises. There are many people who teach breathing exercises out there. I teach a meditation process does not involve breathing, and it's very easy, as Kathy will experience in a few weeks, couple weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks, I think you're taking a class.
Yeah.
So very easy. No focusing of the mind, no clearing the mind of thoughts. Doesn't matter, your mind goes here and there. But the way I teach it, but breathing techniques, there's many breathing techniques out there. My suggestion, if you experiment with the many breathing techniques out there, is to not do forceful breathing. I'm not a believer in forceful breathing. There are many kinds of breathing techniques out there. There are like a gajillion of them, and I've done all of them. I don't have done all of them. I've done the range of them out there, and I'm not a proponent of the forceful ones. What if you're really cleared out a lot of your warehouse of garbage, which is I call that the warehouse of junk that we all collect. If that's pretty much cleared out of your physical, psychic, energetic, mental, emotional system, then those more forceful breathing techniques, yeah, it's no big deal. You could do them and stuff like that. But most people are not there, and so I wouldn't. And they can also force open some doorways that you may not be ready to go through. So that's the other thing about some of these forcing techniques that are breathing oriented that I'm not a big proponent of. But I I teach a simple anxiety reducing technique that involves breathing. Just put your hand in your belly button and take some slow, deep breaths, and that's helpful. It doesn't so much do what Tex is asking, though, because he's asking about opening up and expanding the conscious capacity of the mind to the rest of the 90,000 seat Houston Astrodome or whatever football stadium part of our mind.
Yeah.
Breathing techniques are more limited in there. They're kind of more calm. They can stimulate the slow breathing techniques can stimulate the vagus nerve in the nervous system, at the base of the brain stem, and it's the longest nerve system. It goes through all our organs. It's over, and you can stimulate that and calm everything down. So it can have an immediate but temporary effect. But it doesn't have these breathing techniques, not so much, because by definition, the breathing techniques are associated with what? Breathing, the breathing technique. What's associated with breathing? Your body, right? And so, that's why what I teach is not a breathing technique. You can still do it after you physically, biologically die. Can you do a breathing technique when you're dying? It's going to be very difficult because your breathing is shutting down as your biological body shuts down. So that's one. People ask me, I mean, I'm not pouring water on the fire, on breathing techniques generally, but people, because I just told you I teach this one, sometimes to help with anxiety issues, but people will ask me, what's the distinction and what's the downside? And that's a downside because it's associated with the body. Also, people sometimes, high anxiety people, have problems with breathing in general. And the last thing, they'll come to me and they'll say they've tried this breathing, they can't, and the breathing actually makes them have a panic attack. The breathing technique makes them have a panic attack. So that's another,
Well, I think he was talking about, for clarification, I think he was talking about how during your NDE, you had an out-of-body experience, and you had also said that you don't have to, because you had that experience before in your meditations, you don't have to have an NDE in order to have that experience. And breathing apparently isn't, I haven't taken your class yet, so but breathing apparently is not part of that.
Yeah, it's not part of my class, but it's part of many other classes. And again, like I said, I'm not pouring water on them. They can be helpful and so forth and so on. But there's some limitations to the breathing approach. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess I'm enjoying the idea that you don't have to have an NDE to do it all.
Exactly. No.
Oh, thank goodness. So I don't see any more questions right this second, but we could easily open this up. Let's see how I get to do that. How do I do that?
You go gallery.
Gallery, yeah. There we go.
Every-
Bob.
yeah.
I'll do it.
Everyone can turn on their video if they like.
Yeah.
And,
Miriam, are you gonna get on? Yay! Hi. You're
just
muted.
You can unmute.
You're muted, Miriam.
Okay, I'm not anymore.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
And Sean, are you gonna get on? And Kate? I don't know everyone else. Here's Bob.
Everyone's welcome to get on. I do have a question, and it came to me a long time ago. I just had this thought that I don't even know why I was thinking something about this. I said, I just think when you die, whatever happens to you, we have free will. So why don't I just create what happens after I die? Just
Well,
like
that you can do that. So, and that happens. And so there's kind of structural afterlife, and there's what you just said, which is a very subtle point, Noel. It's astute of you to say that, to think that, and to say it, but obviously you thought it. It's very subtle, because you think about this side. Is there structure to this side? Yeah. Like, if I'm not careful walking through my doorway over there, I could bang my shoulder on the door chip. There's a structural reality to physical reality. It's structural. It's not an illusion, my doorway, you know. But can we have experiences here that are mental experience? Because really our experiences on the other side are mental, right? Because we don't have a physical biological body. So if you want to draw the analogy, then between what this side and the other side with what you and I are talking about now, Noel, you can think of really any mental experience that somebody could have here of, let's just use the one that I hear a lot. I get this question a lot from people, you know, the punishment one. Well, can you punish yourself on this side? Absolutely. People do that all the time. They punish themselves. You know, they guilt themselves, the G word, we call it in grief recovery. You're like, don't say the G word. You know, it's like, you know, guilt and so forth. People will do that. That's mental. It's not a structural thing that you're getting punished unless you structurally on this side break a criminal law, and then you structurally on this side get thrown into a thing we call jail. That's structural, okay? That's social laws, you know, norms and so forth, mores, criminal laws, prison, etc. It's a place, it's a physical structural place. But you can mentally punish yourself. So on the other side, there's no prisons, there's no structural, like, you know, on the other side. But can somebody punish themselves on the other side? They have the free will to do that. Just like you.
Well, yeah, I wasn't thinking about doing that. I think I was to have the best party.
No. You have free will to have a party on the other side with all of your friends and go to the most beautiful beach. Even not throwing water on Sean here, but even a more beautiful beach than in Hawaii. I don't know that possibly exists.
Perfect,
I don't know.
Sean.
You know?
Perfect. Oh, that's great. Oh, great. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Tex had his hand up, and then Pamela has her hand up again. So here we go, Tex.
Yeah, well, for beaches, I could recommend the Seychelles. I mean, that can give some competition to Hawaii, but that's okay. That's a different story. Anyway,
can you get me on a plane there, Tex? Let's have a conversation about that offline.
that's right, offline. Okay. Now, okay, in an NDE, presumably one has stopped breathing. Okay. Now, I know that there are some exercises where, you know, like you breathe in and out like 30 times, and then the last out, you try to hold your out breath as long as possible, which apparently induces your vagus nerve to produce DMT. Referred to as God molecule. Now that can apparently help to, you know, like healing or whatever in the body. That's what I was trying to get at.
Oh, I see.
I tried to.
You're familiar with more about that than I am.
No, I'm not too familiar about it. I mean, I've seen like Wim Hof and some other, you know, like read a little bit, but I don't know that much about it. But I'm just, as you talk, it was excellent. It's paradigm shifting, mind opening. But I just thought maybe there's a link there with Andy and holding one's breath, something like that. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know, Tex. I mean, like even, you know, I don't know about that. But my thing is, I'm not into holding my breath, you know, like except when I almost drowned. I'm glad I did hold my breath. But seriously, I'm not not just holding my breath. Let me say, I'll even go higher up than the more general in the 100,000 foot on. I'm not into playing with my body. I'm not into like manipulating my chemistry, and except in a good, healthy way, like I eat healthy food and I hydrate and I work out and I exercise every day, and that kind of good chemistry. I'm not into manipulating the natural flow of what my body is doing, which holding my breath would do, unless I'm swimming underwater, of course. But, you know, so to me, I like to take a more natural approach. Because why? Because my system, and each of our systems are different from each other, but my system is operating in a certain way. and it's working pretty well, and I don't want to mess it up. Why do I want to induce something that is not naturally happening to me at that given moment in time? And that's why, I guess, I don't know, I've never done any, I'm not averse to doing any past life regressions or whatever, or anything like that. I'm not averse to it, and I don't think anything negative would happen, but I don't need to. So why would I bother when this all just naturally kind of unfolds? So that's kind of my bias. So I just state it as my bias, and you may not have that kind of biases, and but you know, that's the way I kind of live my life, really. You know,
Very wise, very wise.
yeah.
Thank you.
Because balance to me is what's important, and that includes memories. So I don't go searching for past life memories either. And those of you, you know, who, you know, when you read it, you'll read it in my 4th book eventually, but those of you who've seen some of my YouTube videos, I get into some of them, and they're like, I got this 1979, something pops up, and then 1990 something, another piece of that lifetime, and then 2015, another piece, and they go together. And it's just spontaneous. It's not because I'm thinking, sitting around thinking, oh, I want to remember, you know, it's just, no, it's just that's, I'm very organic about my self-development, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
That's so cool. I think all of us want to be that organic. So, Dr. Pamela, do you want to speak right now? You had your hand up.
Yes, I'm just enjoy you so much. And I wanted to ask about how we make that shift out of fear with regard to death. And I know from a personal experience, years ago, when I was first on my journey, I did a sacral cranial healing. And I was talking with a dear friend and cousin who'd passed. And I told her out loud in this healing that I would see her soon. And it was shocking to me when I realized it. And my stepdaughter was in the room, and my sister was performing this on me. And I said, oh, you know, time and eternity is like, you know, but for 3 weeks, I thought I was going to die. And I mean, I was really very much afraid. But a few years later, I felt that I had completely lost my fear of death, because I shifted my perception from thinking of myself as a body with a soul to being a spiritual being having a physical experience. And when I made that shift in my perception, then my fear of death, and of course with that comes the sense of oneness instead of separation. And so I just wondered if that was a common experience, or if that kind of shift helps people, or is something useful to use in terms of working with other people.
Well, the thing is, first of all, the blanket statement is whatever works is great. You know, that you know, you use whatever works. In other words, I'm a pragmatist, right? So could that work with some folks? Yes, sure. But I think the issue is for the type of person for whom that would work, the person really has to have a kind of a foundation already of being pretty open and receptive and inquisitive about everything that you just said, for them to, for those words that you might utter to that person to have, the field's got to be plowed. You know, if you're talking to somebody who's, got layers of clay there that have been tamped down for 1 million years. And then, you know, it's the seeds of what you just said that are beautiful seeds are going to fall there, and it's going to sit there, and it's going to get burnt by the sun. You know, it's that but so somebody who has the field plowed, yeah, those words are great. And it's just a shift of perception. It's a shift, it's a gentle shift, but that's very subtle. And those tend not to be the people who find me. So, but yeah, the short answer is yes, with the right person. Most of the people who find me are just, they're having panic attacks. So, you know, they're in that state, right? Literally. panic attacks, anxiety attacks, waking up middle of the night, during the day, can't work. A lot of them are on disability, literally around the world, not just here in the US, around the world. They're on disability because this is so, that's when they find me, because they're desperate, right? So they've hit the internet. So those are most of the people. So it wouldn't work with them, but sure, it would work with the right person. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Or anybody else? Miriam, did you want to add anything or real quick? You're muted, dear. Here.
I said it was wonderful. I have nothing to add, no questions.
Oh, okay. She's another Kelvin fan now. And Sean, nothing to add? No, just, okay.
No, just thank you. It was wonderful. Enjoyed it very much.
Always.
Okay, then I'll ask one last question
Okay.
for me.
Okay.
Haven't we already decided how we're dying and leaving this planet before we ever came here?
You might do that, but you might not. Not everybody does. You might, but even if you did, there's no guarantees that it will work out that way, because as you pointed out in your first point, or one of your first, I think you were the first one to ask a question about free will. So if you have free will, you could change your mind, even if you did have a plan to die at a certain point before you came in other words, is what I'm assuming you're saying. And you could change your mind at any time for whatever reason, because you have free will. And the other reason that it could happen differently is that even if you want to leave the planet on the date and in the way that you've decided before you were born, you know, Kathy may want you to hang around longer, and she's influencing you, and you're kind of like, oh, well, wait a minute, Kathy, I got a date, I got a date to leave. And then she goes, but Noel, I need you to pick me up at the car repair place because I'm stranded, you know. She influences your decision making. You go, all right, all right. And, you know, so that, but I'm just kind of jokingly, but seriously, there are lots of other minds who you don't know, who are influencing us too. And, you know, maybe you wanted to do it in a certain way, and maybe it's a certain location, and for whatever reason, there's a COVID, you know, or something breakout, and then they close the place. And then you're like, that beautiful beach, I'm dying on the beach at sunset, and that's day. And close the beach.
And you're not allowed on the beach.
I'm sure it's not on the conscious level, but, you know, I was, you know, someone said we have several exit points that we plan out ahead of time.
Some people might, and a lot of people, because this whole planning thing, just think about it this way from 100,000 foot. How many people do you know? Think about just the people you know. How many of them are planners? They've planned their life out. Their jobs, their children.
My husband.
Yeah, how many? Yeah, okay, your husband. Who else? How many? What percentage of the people you know, if you walk through the supermarket and you chat with them, what percentage of the planet do you think are planners?
0.01.
Just look at, I'm going to pick on Congress now, just because in a non-political way, I'm not talking about which side of the aisle. You just look at any politician. How many of them are real planners? Not that many. They're very opportunistic. They claim to be planners. They're not really, you know, they're change in a heartbeat, right? Talk about planning. They plan something out and it changes because this changes and that changes. And I'm not saying you shouldn't change, but, you know, most people are not planners. So, you know, the notion that everybody always plans is false. Clearly, you look around. Not everybody always plans. Some people plan. And so, yeah. You may.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. We're out of time, but we'll have to do this again and again and again. Thank you so much, Kelvin. I love your storytelling. I feel it's a great way to learn. And I love what you share because it makes everything accessible to us and gives us more the chance to be in the driver's seat rather than victims of our circumstances.
Yep. Yep.
Good point, good point. And Calvin, tell us about this class you have coming up and how people can contact.
Yes.
That one's full, I think.
Oh, well, the meditation class I have coming up, that Kathy's going to be in a couple weeks there. That is a waiting list. And then I have another one, I think is 1 or 2 seats left in March. But you can go on my website, turningwithin.org, turningwithin.org. That's my meditation website. I have 4 websites. The easiest way to navigate is just Google my name. And then you see one of the websites. You go to the bottom of any page on any of the websites, and there's hot links to the other 3. So, my kelvinchin.org website is my more spiritually oriented website. And then I have one on overcoming the fear of death. And then I have one for my books. So, but I also have an Afterlife series that starts on another 6-part series starting on February 20th, Sunday, February 20th at 10 o'clock Pacific time, 1 o'clock Eastern time, for over 12 weeks, every other week, 6 sessions. And that you can watch a preview of what I'm going to talk about in the Afterlife series classes on my kelvinchin.org website. So you just go there, look for the Afterlife series, and there's 2 short videos there, 20 minutes long, something like that. And I talk about what I'm going to talk about. And so this will be the 13th time I'm doing the 6-part series. So I get into reincarnation, NDEs, what happens when we die, who greets us, what am I leaving out? Communicating with the other side, what part of us continues for eternity, and what part of us continues from lifetime to lifetime, etc. I get into all of that in great detail. The sessions started out 13 sessions ago. It started out about an hour and a half to each session. Now they're 2 to 3 hours each, because I'll speak for an hour or an hour and 20, and people will ask me questions for an hour and a half to 2 hours after that, after each session.
That would be me.
And I record it if people can't make them all. Not everybody can make them all live, and some people don't even make any of them live, and they just send me questions. And so February 20th, Sunday, is the next one.
Wonderful. Thank you.
About every 4 months.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. Always a pleasure to see you. And I have one thing to say to you. I asked you whether your mustache and whether your facial hair was new, and you said no. But I was looking at the back cover of your book.
Oh, yeah.
And I was going like, I thought no, he's. So I'm just having fun.
I think this is a COVID facial. This is COVID facial hair. This is like
same here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone, for coming. It's been a joy to be with you. And
wonderful.
Come back next week. We have something completely different. Grandmother Mary Fix, who is a Scottish grandmother. And she's going to be sharing a lot of her wisdom. So very unusual. She's going to have a fire keeper. She's going to have 3 different celebrants around the world with us. So it's very interesting. So thank you, Kel. We love you.
Thank you, Kel. We love you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Hosting again.
All righty.
Have a great.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Noah.